We also present the co-host of this evening, Kasia Kazimierowska.
Good evening. Good evening.
And we are very excited. Let us begin with these words. We have just seen the film. Together we had a look at the examples of repaying debts, of payback. Some of them were drastic, some were frightening, but most of them were mainly interesting in terms of cultural anthropology. So what we would like to do now is to dig deeper together with you. And we have some questions about your personal feelings, experiences, and so on. So let us begin with the first one.
Yeah, the first one is actually ecological point of view. In the film we've just seen, the most frightening image, at least for me, is the one of the oil flowing out of the BP oil rig. Just remember, we know that an evil thing happened, and we cannot actually, in a way, pay off to the nature or our future generations. What was your reaction to the tragedy that happened in 2010? Do you remember?
Yes, in 2010 I was on an island off the coast of Georgia when that happened. And Georgia, the state, is on the southeastern coast of the United States. And we were very worried that that oil, because of the currents, would flow around Florida and come up the coast of the United States and kill everything. Because if it lands on the coast, if it lands on the land part, of course, all of the beach, the shore, all of that part of the land is really destroyed. So we were very worried about that, and we watched it with great alarm because the place where we were was a very crucial stopping place for migratory birds. So birds that fly up from South America into North America, where they stop, they would have been decimated. So every time there is a catastrophe like that, it destroys a specific part of nature, and it's very hard to get that back. Now, there was a repayment in connection with that catastrophe. It was a repayment to people. It was a repayment to people like shrimp fishermen whose livelihood was destroyed by that oil spill. But you cannot repay nature with money. Nature does not deal in money. So it is very hard to imagine how you can repay nature other than by repairing the damage that has been done. And as you saw, the cleanup efforts with that oil spill are continuous. They're still going on. The oil keeps washing up on shore, even more. And it will be a long time before we really know what the total impact of that has been. Luckily, this spill was in southern waters, where there are microbes that do eat oil. And had they not used that dispersant, which was a very bad decision, had they not used that, eventually the microbes would have eaten the oil. If you had a similar spill in the Arctic, those microbes don't exist there. So the damage would have been much longer lasting and even more horrific. Put into your mind the fact that 80% of the oxygen we breathe is produced by blue-green algae that live in the ocean. And if you look at a map of those, you will see that a huge patch of those is in the northern Pacific. So imagine all of those algae being destroyed. You will very soon have trouble breathing. This is not a comforting thought. It doesn't make us feel happy. We don't feel happy. So nature would ultimately repair itself. The thing at issue is whether we human beings wish to continue to live on the planet. If we do wish to continue to live on the planet, we have to give some thought to the balance that is there in nature producing our oxygen. Unless we want to build some great big oxygen producing machines.
Well, thank you for that. Well, I would like to ask you personally, what is the form of your fight for respect towards nature and repaying debt? You are well known as an eco-activist. So what do you do for the respect of nature?
Our work is partly with birds, because if you keep a healthy habitat for birds, you are also keeping a healthy habitat for everything in that space, including human beings. So if the water is clean, it's clean for us too. If the air is clean, it's clean for us as well. If the soil is clean, it is also clean for us. If all of those things are dirty and polluted, we also are suffering the consequences. So it's not a question of nature on one side and people on the other. We are very connected. We cannot live without nature. Nature can live without us, however. So it's like that. So part of it is with birds and part of it is with land conservation. If we have a situation, which is unlikely, if we ever have a situation in which everything is covered with cement, we would no longer be alive. As I've already pointed out, the oxygen we breathe comes from plants.
I would like to move towards a different issue, which is the possibility of repaying the debt. In one of the interviews, you said that even the end of a conversation with a journalist like me is a situation when we look for equality.
Yes.
One side
look for balance.
Yes, balance.
Yes.
One side says thank you, the other replies thank you.
Yes.
This is how we obtain it.
Yes, and if the other side doesn't say thank you, we think that person has been quite rude.
That's right.
We feel that we are owed a thank you. We were owed a thank you, and we didn't get paid the thank you.
Mm-hmm. But this works only for a situation that lasts like half an hour maximum.
Mm-hmm.
And what about some greater debts, such as the ones that we are born with? Is it possible to repay all debts completely and live without them?
I think possibly not, because every day something else comes along which causes the balance to move one way or the other, and then we have to right it, or we feel that it has to be righted. For instance, if you go to the shop, if you buy something, there is an exchange, and that can be a happy exchange in which each side is pleasant, or it can be an unpleasant exchange and you come out feeling quite angry. Yes, you're paying money, but you're also having a human interaction. You're interacting with another human being. Or if you, the example I sometimes use in Canada is that if you're in your car and you allow somebody else to come into the line in front of you, if you let them in Canada, it's the habit to give them a wave. That person should give you a wave.
We just flash lights in Poland.
You flash lights. We give a wave like that, or sometimes just a couple of fingers. And if you let the person in and they don't give you a wave, you really feel very annoyed. You feel not acknowledged. Your kindness in letting them in. They should at least go like that. And if you're in the car with a man, for instance, and he's driving and the other person does not let them in, At that point, you usually hear some swear words about the other driver. Isn't that right, Martin?
Very right.
Yes, it's right. Some swear words. Yes, a different sort of hand signal then may happen. So we're doing this every day. And one of the reasons we teach our children manners, say please, say thank you, is if that child goes out into the world without that knowledge, they will probably encounter some unhappy situations. And if you have not taught them manners, they will not know why. They will not know how they are supposed to behave. So that is one reason that parents try to tell their children what will be expected of them in these exchanges.
And which one of your personal debts is the greatest burden to you personally?
Oh, well, sometimes they aren't burdens. Sometimes they're just situations. For instance, you receive, as a writer, you receive inspiration from other writers. And you learn writing and reading from often people who are long dead. They wrote centuries ago, but you still owe them a debt of gratitude. So how are you to repay that? Well, the only way that you can repay it as a writer is to do your own work in the best way that you can. That is the way that you repay that debt. If we have had parents who have been good parents and who have helped us in our lives, we will always owe them a debt of gratitude. If you then become a parent yourself, part of what you're doing is passing on the care that you have received. You are passing it on to the next generation. Many of us have had teachers that have been very influential in our lives and have helped us and taught us things that have been very valuable. Those people may be dead now, or they may be quite old, but you probably will try to repay that debt by, in your turn, teaching somebody else when you're in a position to do that. When you're the older generation, you will then try to pass that along. And that is how we behave as social beings. We probably for millennia, we have learned from our elders and passed on to our youngers, and that is how we transmit knowledge and things that people might need to know. For instance, if you were on the savannah in a small social group and Uncle George got eaten by a crocodile, and you were able to tell the young people, don't go swimming there. How useful that is. So those are the children that grow up and do not get eaten by crocodiles. And then they have other children and they also say, don't go swimming there. That's how we pass things along, these stories that move from generation to generation. It's cultural knowledge and it's often useful for survival.
You depict a social and political reality where every action is a result of a debt, the rule of reciprocity and so on. This seems to be somehow a blanket vision. What is it really like? Even when I go to the bathroom to wash my hands, do I pay my debts? Do I make father debts? How does it really work? Because
well, you're probably going to have to pay the water bill, and somebody's going to have to pay for the soap. But all of these things are just one way of looking at things. For instance, in Payback, we're looking at the world through the binoculars of debt, because that's the subject of the book, that's the subject of the film. If we were making a different kind of film or writing another kind of book, we might be looking at things through the binoculars of chemistry. We might be doing that. We might, if we were making a spiritual film, we might be looking through the binoculars of divine grace. You know, we could do that if that was our inclination. If we were writing a film about story, about narrative, then we would be looking at things through the binoculars of story. What is the story? How is one event linked to another event? What is the difference between a story and an anecdote? The thing that is most like a novel in Payback is the story of the blood feud in Albania. That could be not only a novel, it could be a reality TV show. Because it is very much like a story. So this happened, that happened, here's the results, here are the characters involved, here are the effects on the characters, what's going to happen next. We don't know, but it's that kind of story. The story of the tomato growers. You could make a novel of that. If we were talking about how to make a novel out of series of events like that. So it's really just a question of which magic spectacles you're looking through.
So our vision is flexible.
Our vision is extremely flexible.
Okay, I have one question about the institution of prison, because we could see in the movie some prisoners that just left the prison or used to be imprisonment. And the question is, how do you see it? Because in my way of thinking, we actually, as a society, pay a double debt for the prisoners when they make a crime, so we pay for it, actually as victims, let's say. And the other is we pay for them when they are kept in imprisonment. So actually we pay our debts, or our bills, so we could keep them there. And actually, do they actually repay their debts, or do we pay twice as a society?
I'd say we pay twice myself. And I think part of the interesting message, if there is one, is that maybe we should be rethinking how we're doing all of that. Our way of doing it in our society is not the only way of dealing with crimes. There have been many other different ways of dealing with it. Our way is very expensive. We're also paying our taxes to support a huge criminal justice system, which is so arcane and complicated and hardly anybody can understand it. So maybe there are other ways of dealing with that, and maybe we should be thinking about prevention rather than crime and punishment. We know, for instance, that if we put money in on the educational end, it's much less expensive, and it does reduce crime. There has to be a place for people who are otherwise going to be very dangerous to other people, for sure. But what we call white-collar crimes and more minor crimes and juvenile crimes, there are other ways of dealing with that that are much less expensive, and in which the person actually does repay. They may repay, for instance, through social service. So maybe we should think again about how much this is costing and whether it works. We do have an inherent wish to punish people. You know, that's a human thing. But maybe we should restrain ourselves somewhat in this respect, or rethink how we're doing that. We like fairy tales in which the bad person gets rolled downhill in a barrel full of nails. You know, we actually do like that. But we have to admit that that is a fairy tale.
Okay, in the film we saw that one can assume some various strategies towards debts. We saw some of them. A debt can be solved, paid, or suppressed. One can
or ignored. Or you can change your name and run away.
Yes, absolutely. We can also protest against it. This is the strategy, for example, of the Occupy movement. Is there any point to protest against that?
For sure. There's an interesting economic system called microeconomics, particularly in the Grameen Bank that was started in Pakistan, in which small amounts of money are loaned to really poor people who exist in groups. They form groups and they help each other. And that system actually has the highest rate of repayment of any system in the world. And it replaced a system in which the interest rates were so high that nobody could ever repay. So I think when you're looking at structures of debts, you have to look at whether the people to whom you are loaning the money ever have a chance of repaying. One of the things that happened in 2008 with the great financial meltdown was that too much money had been loaned to people who would never be able to repay it. So the whole structure then collapses. But this is very, very old. It goes back certainly to the Code of Hammurabi in ancient Mesopotamia, and there were debts there, and there were systems for repaying them, one of which was that you could sell your wife and children. We don't allow that anymore, I guess. Where you could sell you could sell your wife and children and yourself. So debt slavery. So really you have to look at, if you incur a debt, can you ever pay it off? One of the things that happens in India is that the dowry system puts families in such hideous debt that they can never really get out of it. So all of it, and that can happen with a country too. You know, they borrow too much. They can't, no matter what they do, they can't repay it. And one of the examples I use in the book is ancient Greece, in which the society had stagnated because too few people controlled too much wealth and too much debt. And a lawgiver came in who wrote it off, which gave the country a new start and led to a great efflorescence of creativity. That doesn't always happen, but it's not unknown for countries to default on their debt. Better, however, to avoid a situation in which you get into that kind of debt in the first place. And to avoid that kind of situation, you have to have a government that is not corrupt, in which people are not borrowing the money and then stashing it in a Swiss bank account. Anyway, these are very complex economic problems on your individual level. It often affects students who incur too much debt, paying for their education, particularly in North America. They graduate, they have a degree, but they also have a huge debt. It renders them quite hopeless. They don't know how they can ever get out of this debt and then actually make progress.
So heading to the end, just before we give the microphones to the audience, I would like to ask you, well, maybe tell you that for us, female journalists, this is no accident that you, a female writer, voice of emancipation, talk about that. That is hot. It stirs emotions. It's enough to just take a look at the streets of Greece and so on. Somehow that is the new black. Why? Why only now? Why are we all going to dwell on it now? Why not before?
Why not before, indeed? I started writing this book 3 years before 2008. It was published exactly in 2008, at the time of the big meltdown, and everyone thought I was a clairvoyant. But I am not a clairvoyant. I just happened to be interested in it, partly through the 19th century novel, which once you start really looking at it, money is the substructure for all of those novels. And partly because I read the signs in the underground, and on buses. And all of a sudden there were a lot of signs saying things like, "We will help you get out of debt." Well, if there are all those advertisements it means that there is a market for it. So there were enough people in trouble to be the market for these various agencies who were going to help you get out of debt if you gave them some of your money. So I always look at those things, and in the 1950s there were a lot of girdle ads. So what was of interest then was that women should not wiggle. You don't see those anymore. Now you see ads about debt. In the 1940s, there were a lot of ads about laundry soap. Don't see those anymore either. It's not what people are selling. So it's very interesting to see, all right, what is it? What is it that society is interested in? And you can see it through the ads a lot. Of course, I grew up with Marshall McLuhan, so.
So did we. Does anyone have questions, Margaret Atwood? Would anyone like to ask her something?
I will ask you something. How's Warsaw right now?
Sunny.
It's sunny. How are people feeling?
They are preparing for Euro 2012 football match. Games.
Oh.
Yeah. Come join us.
But they're happy. So football is the round look, right?
See the reactions.
There is one reaction. Wait for it. Hello, my name is Margaret. I'm really thrilled to, be able to see you and actually talk to you. I am a big fan of yours, especially your poetry. And when I was watching the movie, it came to my mind. I recalled one of your poems. I don't know if I remember the title correctly. The Song of Worms.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, bingo. And as you may remember, what the poem is about.
That was about the 99%.
I wanted to ask you, since it was, a couple of years ago when you wrote it, I read it as a poem about a revenge of nature on people, on humans, on civilizations. And when I was watching the movie, I was thinking about, this is the moment when they take revenge, when they, things get equal. Would you read it in that light right now, when you have the lenses of debt? Thank you.
Well, that would be predicting the future, which is something I try never to do. Let us say that there are always more worms than you think. There are really quite a lot of worms. The largest biomass on the planet is underground. So I would have to go back and look at the poem, but I try not to read those things allegorically, by which I mean I try not to make a one-to-one correspondence. So it's an open-ended meaning which you can apply because you ultimately are the reader. I'm only the writer.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I recently, a couple of months ago, I read on the news that in China they had this, and it was quite successful. They had this key rings with small, how we call it, like with small fish or small turtle inside. And when
Yes.
I heard it, I read it, I was so shocked, and I remember from the year of the flood, there was the same thing there. And I was like, Jesus, we are already there.
Yes, well, we were already there when I wrote the book because I got it from real life. They were already putting little fish in purses and earrings and things then. So, yes, we're already there.
Okay, it doesn't sound really, optimistic. But
No,
maybe
well,
it's real life.
Many times people think I make things up, but in fact, I've taken them from real life in the first place.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Martina, and I'm also a great big
fan of your work, especially your novel.
Okay.
And sorry, excited to talk to you. Generally, I would like to talk about religion maybe, because a couple of years ago I was struck by how Christianity and Catholicism puts us in debt, because Jesus died on the cross for us, and this is such a huge debt that we are supposed to repay somehow for his great sacrifice. And I was so struck by the fact that I had no influence on this debt. I didn't want it to be done for me, but still I'm expected to repay it somehow. And have you thought about religion in this sense of it?
Yes, in the book called Payback, it is chapter 2.
Oh, okay.
It's exactly about that, and it's about the fact that in English the same word is used for redeeming a debt or redeeming something in a pawn shop as is used in religious terminology. And the real theological construction is that we incurred original sin with Adam, a huge debt that can never be repaid by any individual person because it's so big, and Jesus then came along and repaid the debt for us. Okay, that's that story. So he redeemed the debt. So before that debt is redeemed, you're like an object in a pawn shop. You're not exactly in hell, but you're also not in heaven either. You're in the pawn shop. You're in the pawn shop of the soul. So that is how that piece of theology works out. And there is a long history of incurring debts of that kind. I begin with the ancient Egyptian religion, in which the first thing that happened to you when you died was that your soul got weighed in a balance. It was on one half of the balance, and on the other side of that balance was something called the feather of truth. And truth didn't mean just truth and lies, it meant the way the universe was supposed to be. So the sun coming up in the morning, and how you conducted your life, whether you had been a good person, whether you had lived properly, and that's what your soul was weighed against. And if you had been a very bad person, your soul was quite heavy, and you got eaten by a crocodile-headed god, which of course you didn't want that to happen. You could cheat in ancient Egypt. You could put things called coffin charms in your coffin, which essentially instructed your heart, which is being weighed, and instructed your heart how to lie. So there's always a bit of a way out. About the only religion in which there's no way out is Calvinism, in which you're predestined from the beginning. You know, you're damned or you're saved, and you don't even know, and you've got no control over it, and it's always been that way. In Catholicism, people can help you out. You know, they can go and say masses for you, and they can light candles for you, and get you out of purgatory faster. So there's human agency, something to be done. In Calvinism, that's it. So yes, it is a theme. It is a theme in the book, which the movie doesn't deal with. But every religion has got some sort of, if you've been quite bad on earth and there has been no punishment for you, we dearly wish to believe that in the afterlife at least, the good are rewarded and the bad are dealt with. We like to believe that. It's comforting.
So I'm definitely reading the book now, so thank you.
Hello, my name is Mathieu, and thank you so much for writing such an inspiring book and for providing the inspiration for the film. What struck me also was the fact that between humans, debt can be repaid. It is conceivable to think of a form of repayment. The currency might be different. Sometimes it is money, sometimes it is time, Sometimes it is perhaps, I'm not sure this is a currency, but something along the lines of compassion or contrition. But I can't really think of a way to repay debt to nature. Do you have any consolation to offer?
Yes, we did talk about that a little bit. You can't repay nature directly with money because nature is not interested in such a completely human symbolic construct. You can't go to a fish and say, you know, here's $5. But you can repair, which is, I suppose, a form of repayment, and you can preserve. However, again, we are in the habit of thinking of nature as being something over there, not connected with us. Nature is inside your lungs. Nature is in your body. You are part of nature, whether you like it or not. Old terminology is to recognize that when they used to say, when a person died, they would say, he has repaid his debt to nature. And what that meant was that you borrowed everything in your physical body from nature in the first place. You had the use of it while you were alive, and then at the end you repaid it. In other words, your molecules and atoms go back into nature, and something or somebody else gets to use them next time round. So you do in fact contain an atom that was used once by a brontosaurus, or if you prefer, a tyrannosaurus rex. This is a circulating bank of atoms, and there's a set number on the planet. A few of them escape once in a while into the rest of the universe, but we have this many on the planet, and sometimes they take the form of us, and sometimes they take the form of a giant squid. So that's what we mean by that expression. So whether you like it or not, you will ultimately be repaying something to nature. But that's a kind of a gruesome thought. What you really meant was, how do we balance destruction caused by human beings? And that's what conservation organizations are always working to do. You will be happy to know that in situations in which they have created marine parks and in which they have controlled overfishing, the fish do come back. They're having good results with that right now.
I'm afraid that these will be the last two questions, as we don't want to owe too much to the organizers.
Hi, nice to meet you, nice to see you. I've got a big debt to the internet and Mother Nature to help this connection, by the way.
It's all right, you'll be paying the phone bill later.
I was wondering, as we see Mother Earth is angry, and I was wondering what is the best way to deal with this anger? Is it by education or by building enclaves and living there? And this question is connected to the other one. Is it alright to pay the debts of the others, as you do working in this foundation, giving birds? Is that alright with the nature and with the debt, and with the others as well?
The other what?
The other people, the others who caused the damage.
The others who caused the damage. Yes, that's always a problem, isn't it? In a way, it's sort of like the question we were talking about, having to do with crime. So what do we do about a situation in which some people are not repaying and others are repaying too much, or more than their share? And that seems to be something we're kind of stuck with as human beings. In this case, those who have consciences end up paying more than those who don't. And that's unfortunate, but on the other hand, those with consciences wouldn't feel happy unless they did that. How do we make it fairer? Well, sometimes governments try to legislate a situation that is more fair to everyone, and sometimes, on the other hand, they don't. I think we're influenced quite strenuously in the 20th century by social Darwinism, but biologists are now rethinking that. And for instance, France de Waal has written a book called The Age of Empathy, in which it turns out that we're actually much more caring and social and prone to helping than we have been told. So if that view takes hold, we will become more, our societies will become more caring and helping, and we will no longer be told that our real nature is selfish and greedy, and therefore selfishness and greed are really what we ought to be doing. I would hope that view would now fade somewhat, and that a view of ourselves that includes empathy will become more prevalent, because that appears to be the biological truth about us. It's not that we're always helpful and caring. We know that ourselves. We're not. But our nature does include that.
Well, with this corrupted government, how can we get there? By education, by reading English, giving examples? What is your way?
Well, governments are driven, as you know, by money and how they get people to vote for them. So you, the voters, you're going to have to make some decisions about who you think you are. You know, is your government reflecting who you think you are? There are many different models of governments here and there around the planet, and sometimes countries find themselves in a situation such as Canada's right now, in which we did think we were a fair, caring, sharing country, and our present government is otherwise inclined. So how long are we going to go along with that view? Will we then say, well, actually, that's not who we are, that's not who we think we are, and we're going to vote for somebody else?
Thanks, God, you have a choice, by the way.
It's nice to have a choice. It's always nice to have a choice. And in really totalitarian situations, you don't have a choice.
Like in America.
So sometimes you also don't have a choice, because although you appear to have a choice, it's money controlling both of the choices that you have. So whichever one you pick, you're going to get the same kind of thing anyway. That's called an oligarchy, and to be avoided, but sometimes it's hard to do that.
Thanks for
Okay,
coming.
there's one more question.
And there.
Anybody?
I can hear you, yes.
So, do you think it is possible in the future that we able, as a society, vote against international corporations, saying that we don't want you here and we don't want, because we don't want to pay your debt, and it just maybe completely utopic thought of me?
Well, you can do that, but it's probably a better idea simply to regulate rather than expel. First of all, about the international corporations, you're going to have to decide whether you want whatever it is that they are selling. So think carefully about that. I think any government can regulate international corporations by changing tax law and by changing the law saying what they can and cannot do. Unfortunately, the United States has just passed a law that says something that is quite absurd, namely that a corporation is the same as a human being. They palpably are not. Corporations cannot die, human beings do die. I would be in favor of corporations being human beings as long as they were willing to accept mortality as the consequence. You know, that suddenly the corporation would have a heart attack, but this doesn't happen. So that is an absurd situation, but that is what they have done to themselves right now. But you're a government can make laws about corporations saying what they can and cannot do. The unfortunate situation in my books, Oryx and Crake and the Year of the Flood, is that corporations are de facto the government. And we have moved more in that direction, and it's really unfortunate because once you no longer have a government that is separate from corporations, there is nobody to stand up for you, the citizen, when the corporation does something like dumping a bunch of toxic waste into your drinking water. There should be a government separate from the world of business. There should be a judiciary that's separate from the government. It's the only way to avoid a really totalitarian situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for asking questions, and thank you very much for being with us tonight. We are waiting for your next books, of course, and hopefully we're seeing you in close future. Thank you very much.
I hope so too.
Okay. Thank you.